Alright, so we're in the 10th anniversary Cobra, and my buddy sat in it for the first time, and he tried turning the lights on, and the Indiglo didn't work. So, it kind of bothered me, and I looked into it, and I knew that these go out time to time, and so it turns out that there's probably something that needs to be repaired on the back side of the cluster. There's a guy in SVT Performance who does it, and he said he's already done over 50 of them, so looks like I'm going to be pulling this cluster out. I already took out the little stars here. They were a T15, there you go. Alright, so I pulled out the bezel here after I got the those little screws out from the top, and it pulled straight back. You don't want to break the tabs that go in there. And now I gotta get these ones that are the same size as the last one. There's 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that'll get the whole cluster out where I can look at the wires. Alright, there it is. It's out, and you know, there was the boost line right here that's on that barb. That was difficult. It's this little guy right here. And I remember that was there at the last minute. I remember I had to pull that off. But just these 2 harnesses with clips on the top you can get off with your finger. Push down on them and pull them out. Alright, so I ordered the brand new inverter. It's the part number A-invert-05. And it has a dimmer switch, which we will be cutting off. And it has all these extra gauge connectors, which we will be cutting off as well. So I clipped off the dimmer switch on each side. I put a piece of heat shrink over the end and heated it up and kind of molded the the end down, because I just don't like live wires under there. I don't know if this is necessary, but I'm just doing this. You know, they said you could just clip this wire off, but I'm doing this just to be safe and cap off each of these wires. Alright, so those are capped off. Next is to cut off the extra switches, extra leads, wires. Give it a little bit of slack and cut these. Now there's 2 wires there that we'll be using. Alright, I took these 6 of these out, and that lifts this back cover right off. And next we'll be going for the speedometer. I believe this is the speedometer pin. We're going to unplug this, and over here is the inverter switch. So we're going to take those 2 things off very carefully. Alright, so I wiggled this and pulled up on it very gently and unplugged it from the pins. And on this one I pushed down the little tab and very carefully pulled it out. So now that would clear us to get this backboard off and get to the inverter, which is under here. Alright, so I'm very gently pulling this up. I just give it a little bit of pressure. It kind of catches here and there, but pull it up and get it out of the speedometer switch there. Alright, so that's out. Gently set it aside. And now we're going to take this cover off, and that's where the inverter is. It's underneath there. Okay, so I took all of these out. There were 6, 7, I don't know, there's a bunch of them that go around the edges. And now I'll be able to put this gently back down and lift the back off. There it is. Now there's the inverter we're going for right there. Alright, so luckily I had this 564 Allen style one, and I used that to get the inverter screws out on each side. So with the inverter out, I clipped off each side of the wiring harness, and I wiggled the board and broke loose the little glue that was holding, and took the cover off. And some guys can say you can reuse this cover to hold the new inverter down, so I'm going to do that. Alright, so using the second one down here, third, the 16, sorry, there, the 16, I stripped that wire, stripped those 2, and I will solder them to the old switch, and it doesn't matter which one you do on here from what I've read. So one for each on this side. So using some clothespins, I hold the wires together and I mesh the wiring together on each side, and I will dab those with some solder, and you can't really see, but there's heat shrink I've already placed on the wires. I've slid them over the wires to begin with before doing all this. And once that solder is on there, then I will slide the heat shrink over and heat shrink it, and that should hold it together. Alright, there's the solder on the wires, and now I will slide the heat shrink over and I will heat shrink these together. I am not the best at wiring. My dad was in the Air Force during Vietnam, and he wired Air Force jets and did all sorts of stuff. I wish he was here to help me with this. Alright, now on the other side, the black goes to the black. That one's done, and here you have the green and blue wire go to the other white wire. And so those will be soldered together and heat shrink. And I'm using a lighter to melt the heat shrink, just so you know. Now what I did wrong, I put a piece of heat shrink over each wire, and I realized that I had two pieces of heat shrink trying to shrink one wire to them, so I cut them off, and I cut this one, slid it open, wrapped it around, so it gets the two wires and the one all together. Alright, so I used the old case of the inverter to put that snug down, the wires coming out to the white side, the colorful other ones coming that will come through the other cover. They are a little long, but rather be a little long than too short, so we'll put this back together. Alright, so this goes back together when the inverter's on its side, with the wires coming out each way, and then that comes down nice and straight. Alright, so the white wires are plugged in, and then this white case is going to go with the speedometer switch coming through here, and the colorful ones coming through where the boost line is. So I took this time to get a clean microfiber and some distilled water and cleaned out the dust that accumulates here in the gauges. Alright, so I went through and I snugged down all the perimeter screws. Not too tight, just get them nice and snug. Alright, next comes the circuit board. I put this through and this through. Those will be plugged back in. And I noticed on these little things that as I was putting it back together, these little center pieces came up through. So I made sure to snug those all nice down tight, made a little creaking noise, and popped into place. Alright, so that plugged in really nice, clipped in very careful with those really tiny pins. And on this one I plugged it in, and then I made sure to push these wires down around so that it doesn't interfere with the boost line going back on. Alright, so then I just screwed down the rest of those, put it all back together, and it should be ready to go and plug into the car. Alright, so here we go. They work. They're on, and they do dim, but they don't seem as bright as they were. Maybe they are. I don't know. I have an 04 Cobra here. We can go check. Alright, here we are in the 04. And the 04, dim, on. They might not be as bright as they were, but at least they work. So I don't know if that has to do with the dimmer switch, or, you know, sometimes you can solder the two dimmer switch wires together and make them brighter. That's a possibility. But anyway, we'll see. Alright, so gauges are working, everything's fine. And I'll put that bezel back in as soon as I clean it up. Alright, so I just came into the other garage and cleaned this all up nice, got all the dust off of it, and I will be putting this back in now. Alright, so that's all back together, and the dimmer switch still works, the factory one. I pulled the whole thing out again and wired the two dimmer switch wires together, because with the booster pump you can do that for full voltage. And when I did that, it gave no lights to the cluster, so that's not the way to fix it. So that new inverter works, but it's not as bright as the 04, so I don't think it's as bright as it used to be, but it does work and it will still dim. On this one, when you dim it, it goes really dim, but it doesn't go dark. And now on this one, when you dim it, it goes all the way dark and then semi-bright. So just a little heads up for that. But anyway, mostly this is for the install and how to do it. There were great write-ups on the forums. SVT Performance had an awesome one that showed you how to wire it, how to do it all. So credit to all those guys who helped me out. I followed their directions, but I thought a video would be good to show how to do it, and because there were still some questions I had about what wires were where and how to get the inverter out and what it looked like and all that stuff. So anyway, I hope this video is helpful to you guys.